And a satisfactory answer in that circumstance is to say, I'm sorry, I don't know. Shall we go and look it up? Okay? The tendency, of course, is to flannel and to try to bluff your way through it and to give the student the impression that you know everything. The student will recognize that you are not, that you don't know what you're talking about, and that will demotivate the student from learning, because what's the point of learning if you're going to tell them lies when they ask questions? So your answers must be satisfactory. And the student has to be the teacher has to be non-judgmental of the student. The student will come with ideas that are wrong. They will come wanting to learn things that are not useful. You need to engage them in dialogue and not just tell them that they're stupid. If we move on to experience and its role in learning, perhaps the most well-known model of experiential learning is Kolb's learning cycle, where we encounter something in experience and then we think about it. And then we form a theory about it. Now, I do not mean that we form a formal scientific theory. We just have a working notion of how the world works. So when I was very small, I learned that if I walked into a room, there would be something on the wall called a light switch, and if I pushed it down, the lights would come on. So I have a theory, an inbuilt theory, that on the walls of rooms, usually just to the side of the door, the opening side of the door, there will be a switch. And I have a theory that if I flick it down, the lights will come on. Then, of course, I come to Sudan, and I find you have to flick it up, because the switches are the other way up. They're American standard rather than British standard. So I have to form a new theory, which is, while I'm in Sudan, I flick the light up to get light. That's what I mean by a theory. It's the way that we understand the world. As a result of our theory, we take action. And as a result of that action, we have new experiences, which we reflect upon and form new theories, and so the cycle goes on forever. We keep talking about the need to engender lifelong learning. For goodness sakes, we are all lifelong learners, because every time we have an experience, it affects the way we think of the world, and it affects the way we behave the next time we encounter that situation. This is what is going on all the time. Kolb described styles of learning based on his learning cycle. I can never remember his words, they're too big, so I use Honey and Mumford's words for learning styles, but they're also based on Kolb's learning cycle. So those who like a lot of experience are pragmatists, those who like reflecting are reflectors, those who like forming theories are theorists, and those who like taking action are activists. Now, all of us have different amounts of that learning style in our makeup. There is nobody who is purely a pragmatist, purely a reflector, purely a theorist, or purely an activist. We all have varying amounts of it. But because we all have varying amounts of each type of learning style, we all like different learning methods. And therefore, the corollary of that is that if we are going to set up a curriculum to teach the students, we have to use a variety of learning methods, because we will have students with a variety of learning styles. In my mischievous moments, I say that physicians live down in that bottom corner between reflection and theory. They are reflectors who theorize on life and never do anything else. The surgeons live up in the top left corner. They are activists. They act and they have experiences, but they never reflect on them. If we move away from the psychologically based theories and into the theories of the social constructivist ones, the first of those is situated learning. And this was popularized by Vygotsky, who was a Russian child psychologist, educational psychologist, who wrote in the 1920s. And Vygotsky observed that if you took two children at the age of 7 and you gave them a task that they worked on alone, both children would achieve to the level that you would expect of a 7-year-old. If you then gave them support, Some of the children would perform to a level that you would expect of a 10-year-old, and some would perform to a higher level. This support, interestingly, could either be a teacher or it could be peers. It did not need to be somebody with experience. A peer group would have this kind of performance. The difference between what you expected when they were working alone and what they achieved when they were working with support, Vygotsky called the zone of proximal development, and that, of course, is where your learning takes place. So the message from this is that if students, rather than working as individuals, rather than being assigned tasks as individuals, are supported in their learning, they will move then into the area where learning becomes possible. The notion of communities of practice is one that we're familiar with. There's been work done on cooperative learning, and Quinn and his colleagues did a meta-analysis of 63 studies of problem solving in which comparisons were made between competitive learning and cooperative learning. And what was measured was their ability to understand a problem, to plan the solution, to execute the plan, and to check the result. And in all cases, cooperation results in higher quality of problem solving than competition. So, again, we need to be setting up our structures in such a way that the students are encouraged to collaborate rather than be in competition. We had, in one of my workshops, a discussion about, do you give the students grades and tell them who is the best in the class? If you do that, you produce competition. So it may not be the best thing to do. If we have a community that are working together, a clinical team, and one of that clinical team goes off to a conference and learns something new, they come back, and whether or not they actually give seminars or whether they just start putting the new thing into practice, in the course of time, the entire community learns that new piece of knowledge. And we've all, again, experienced that. That is the way communities of practice, communities of learning work. Lev and Wegner did a study of apprenticeships, traditional apprenticeships, and they identified something they called the legitimate peripheral participant. This is somebody who is not formally a member of the community of learning, but is a student who has come along to join in. And this is our medical student. They are